Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with a patch rundown for 6.2F. Now this is actually going to be a very short patch. This is basically all the changes we have. So I'm also going to cover patch 6.2E right after that, and the reason why is because when the patch 6.2E released, I was having a bacterial infection and I tried to record the video, but like 1 minute in I basically couldn't really catch my breath and couldn't really get through the video. So in the end there wasn't really a video for 6.2E, but since F is such a short patch, we're gonna talk about the E patch at the same time as well. So pretty big gameplay changes in the F patch. Basically, it's a huge buff to jungle. Now, if you guys remember, a couple of patches ago, we did get a huge nerf to jungle role where basically junglers would do less damage to jungle monsters and get less gold from jungle monsters, which basically is just a huge nerf to the role in general. And basically, these changes revert that and in fact make jungle even stronger. So firstly, we used to have the thing where after 2 minutes, your damage to jungle monsters reduces by 1% every 12 seconds. And now instead of that, we're now getting 15% bonus base damage against jungle camps and the bonus doesn't decay. So it's basically reverting to what it once was, where every jungler dealt bonus damage to jungle camps throughout the game. And we're no longer having the nerf to damage to jungle monsters, so that's basically just a reversion. And then starting at 7:30, defeating jungle camps no longer grants 20% bonus gold, right? So now this is still active, but now it's starting at 11 minutes. And honestly, by the time you kind of reach 11 minutes, that's when Baron first spawns. So the extra like 3 plus 3.5 minutes that you get of bonus gold is going to help the jungler out quite a lot. So once again, a huge buff to junglers. Conservation stack limit is going up by 30. This is the goal that accumulates when you don't farm a jungle camp, like when you're ganking and things, and when you farm a camp, this is the bonus goal you get. So you're getting even more bonus gold, another huge buff to jungle. And finally, this one is probably the biggest change. You're now going to deal 1000 true damage to monsters instead of 800. And why is this a huge thing? Well, basically, the smite amount has always kind of varied, right? So just to give a very brief history of what smite used to be like, especially in the PC, where last time the amount used to increase I think 3 times across 3 levels. So sometimes the level of your jungler mattered a lot. I think it might even be per level, but basically the level difference between the jungle means a lot. And then they changed it to 800 at a certain level and then 1000 at a certain level. And then in Wild Rift, basically it's always just been 800 at all levels as far as I remember. But now it's going to be 1000 at all levels. And why this matters is because a lot of spells can actually outdamage smite. So you have those common situations where the jungler loses an objective in the late game, right? And the whole team pings the jungler. But honestly, sometimes it's not really even the jungler's fault, because there are a lot of spells that can outdamage a 800 damage smite, right? So for example, spells like Jin's 4th shot, like if he flashes in and 4th shots the Baron when it's low, it's going to do more damage than 800 and it's going to steal the Baron, something like that, for instance. Or like a lot of mages main burst spells when they are like at 3-4 items with like an Oblivion, with an Infinity Orb, and they crit the Baron at low HP, they're going to do more damage than 800 and they're going to steal the Baron, and then it really isn't even your jungler's fault, but he gets pinged anyway. Now the extra 200 damage will help in this scenario quite a bit in terms of securing the jungle monsters and outsmiting like other random spells that could steal. So definitely a huge buff for the jungle role. So overall, just junglers getting a huge buff in this patch. Now the next change that we have is the bonus gold you get for destroying the first inner turret is removed, right? So I think by inner turret they mean the tier 2 tower, because I remember that destroying that tier 2 tower will of course give everyone extra gold, which is a change they made in patch 6.2. So yeah, it no longer grants an additional 100 gold or the extra 25 gold per teammate. So I think the game is a little bit too snowbally and they didn't want you to get extra gold anymore, so that's now just gone. So the game pace maybe will slightly reduce, but probably not really. But yeah, so now let's take a look at 6.2E, which of course I didn't manage to cover. So the first change is to Urgot. Now Urgot gets a small buff, relatively small buff in terms of his AD ratio. Now he was pretty strong at a certain point, and then he, despite not getting changed, the meta around him kind of changed and he slowly just started falling off. I still think he's a pretty decent champion in the top lane actually, so just giving him a bit more damage is going to be very helpful for him. Now Viego is getting a buff again. I think this Viego buff is huge, right? He gets 4 extra base AD. Now you guys know base AD to me is like one of the biggest buffs someone can get, because for example on junglers you get a way faster jungle clear, and then you also of course get just 4 extra AD just for all of your damage, right? So this is gonna accumulate across the entire span of a game to a lot of extra damage for really no reason, right? So huge buff on that one. And then the bonus attack speed you get when camouflage in your E is now going up by 10% at all ranks as well. And remember that Viego just got a buff like I think a patch or two ago before the E patch. So this means that Viego is now going to be one of the strongest junglers like in the game right now. Like they nerfed him a lot in terms of crit Viego, and then they buffed him a lot again. So yeah, Viego is definitely going to be a very strong jungler. Xin Zhao gets 6 extra base armor, and his W, the wind becomes lightning, cooldown goes down slightly, and the challenge duration goes up by 0.5 seconds. Now challenge duration matters because your E range increases when you hit someone with your W, so a very minor buff to Xin Zhao. I don't think it's going to affect too much, but I think he's still in an okay spot regardless. Now Pantheon I did think is a pretty solid jungler. Now nowadays he rarely is played in the Baron lane or the mid lane. He's always, or even support, he's generally always the jungler. So he gets a little bit extra base armor and magic resist. Will help out his early game. Maybe they're trying to help him out in the top lane to make him back in the top lane, because obviously the armor and magic resist does matter against Cam slightly, but it's not really the biggest stat for jungle Pantheon. And then his Aegis Assault, his E, the movement speed he gets when he slams the shield is now increasing in duration by 1 entire second. So just a nice small buff to Pantheon as well. Now Braum is getting a pretty decent buff, right? Like to multiple aspects of his kit, right? Firstly, he gets 30 extra base health, just makes him tankier in the lane. Of course, then his passive, the damage you deal when you proc the passive at 4 stacks is increasing by a base damage of 10 and champion level times 3, so decent amount. And then the bonus basic attack damage after the enemy is stunned is also going up, the base going up by a little bit, champion level also going up by a little bit. So overall, proccing Braum's passive is going to be it's going to lead to a little bit more burst damage, right? So his Q cooldown, which is of course his bread and butter, is going down by 1 second. Mana cost is also going down by quite a bit. In fact, you can see it in max rank, the mana cost is actually the mana cost when he's at base rank previously, so it's a huge mana cost decrease. And his E cooldown is now going down by like 2 seconds at all ranks. So overall, pretty big buffs to Braum. However, Braum is still a pretty niche pick that's really very good against like melee champions, especially some projectile champions. Braum is amazing against, like those with one very big spell, like Seraphine can block Seraphine's ult, you know, things like that. But in general, Braum is not really the most blind pickable champion because he gets bullied a lot in lane. So despite how much they buff him, you know, he's still a very situational kind of pick, but he's going to be amazing in situations that he's good at. So Rumble is getting a nerf. I did think Rumble is one of the strongest, you know, top laners at the moment. So he is getting the nerf where his main damage tool, his Flame Spitter base damage goes down, and the Danger Zone base damage of course goes down as well correspondingly. His W Scrap Shield gets a lower shield value at all ranks as well. So overall, just a pretty nice round of nerfs. Rumble, who I think is definitely in the stronger side and one of the strongest top laners that is in the game right now. So giving him a couple of nerfs does make sense. Now Rammus, I actually think is one of the strongest junglers just because of how much AD champions there are in the meta. You know, the Wind Brothers, you know, ADCs, you know, all of these AD champions are very popular. Rammus is now going up in popularity as well. I hate playing against Rammus personally. He's been showing up way too much in my games, but his base AD is getting the opposite of Viego, is getting a 4 base AD nerf, right? And then his defensive ball curl, which is his W, his main damage tool, cooldown going up by 1 second, and the bonus damage is going down by 10%. So hopefully this will actually matter. And honestly, playing against Rammus after the patch, I don't feel the nerfs have affected him too much. I still think he's pretty strong, but definitely a step in the right direction. Now Ashe, I've also played her after the nerf. I still think she's pretty strong, but the bonus AD she gets when her Q is active is actually going down by 5% at all ranks, so 5% less attack speed for Ashe, and the cooldown of your arrow is actually going up by 10 seconds. So I don't know, Ashe is actually performing very well. Personally, I do think Ashe is a very strong champion, maybe top 5 ADCs at the moment. I do think she's pretty strong, so her getting a nerf does make sense. Now Varus, basically used to be the top ADC before the nerf, gets a pretty big round of nerfs, right? So firstly, his base AD goes down by 4, and as we have covered extensively at the Viego portion, base AD is a very, very important stat, so getting 4 base AD cut off is really huge, right? His Blinded Quiver, which is his W, the one that you have 3 stacks of, the not percent health, but the damage, actually it is the percent health, right? The percent health damage is going down by 0.5% at all ranks, and the AP ratio is going down. So the AP ratio is basically negligible, like 0.012% AP is like, and like 0.015% AP is like, who really cares about that, right? That's a negligible amount, but basically the detonation damage is going down. And then the Chain of Corruption, the ulti is going up by 10 seconds. Now, I always felt that Varus's ult duration the cooldown was way too short, so going up by 10 seconds does make sense, right? So Varus definitely taken down a peg, but I still think is one of the strongest, like definitely still top 3 ADC in my opinion. Karma, her shield is going down in terms of the amount in both the Mantra and the normal version. Now I personally think Karma is one of the best supports. However, I think it's one of the supports that people don't play very well at all, right? Like, people cannot combo on Karma properly, which definitely makes her look a lot weaker than she really is. I think I only see 1 out of every like 15 Karmas who actually combo correctly, which is really rare to see people play Karma well. But if played well, she's definitely one of the strongest, so I think a nerf to her does make sense. Now Zilean, before the nerf, is definitely one of the top supports, right? Like, basically gets banned in a lot of games. His base health regen going down by a bit, as well as his magic resist. Of course, his main bread and butter ability, the bombs cooldown going up by a little bit in the early game, base damage going down by a little bit throughout the game as well. And then his speed up / shielding ability, cooldown also going up slightly, and the shield value is going down slightly. So overall, a nice round of nerfs to Zilean. I think really the main pain points of Zilean is really 2 things, I think. Firstly, his Q does too much damage, right? And the damage got decreased by just a little bit, not too much. I still think he's going to be pretty strong. And number 2, his ult cooldown is just too short, right? These revives are coming out left, right, and center, and I really think they need to nerf his ult cooldown again, right? It did get nerfed before, but I think it needs to get nerfed again. So Aurora has been pretty strong ever since she came out. So her main ability, her Q, is getting a 3% bonus damage reduction on both first cast and recast. Still think she's going to be pretty good, but definitely taken down a peg once again. So items. So we had some pretty interesting item changes. So firstly, Yordle Trap has been a very unpopular item for quite some time now. The mark duration is going up from 5 seconds to 8 seconds, so it's easier to proc the Yordle Trap. But the goal that you get is actually going down, especially in the later parts of the game. So it basically goes from 200 to 300 to now 200 to 240. Now I guess it's kind of balanced out by the fact that it's easier to actually proc the trap. So I guess that kind of does make sense. I'm not sure if people will actually be building the trap, but we'll see. Now Hex Drinker is now 100 gold more expensive, but Maw still has the same price. So basically, the main difference is that each of the Hex Drinkers went up by 100, and of course the combined cost now goes down by 200 to compensate. So this is pretty interesting because Maw is normally built by ADCs as a last item, or built by some fighters as like a third, fourth item sometimes. So not too many Hex Drinker, not too many users of Maw. So I think, like, for ADCs, this nerf really doesn't matter because it's just 100 gold extra to build your Hex Drinker, by which point you should be getting gold pretty easily by last item. And also the combined, the second Hex Drinker doesn't matter because you can't build another Hex Drinker anyway because you don't have any inventory slots. So I think this is targeted more at fighters, right? So for example, like Mbessa, who's building a second, third item Hex Drinker against a heavy AP team, or rather I should say Maw, and this will of course affect them more because of course it's harder to get the Hex Drinkers. Now Death's Dance of course has been pretty strong, so it's getting a 2% nerf in terms of the damage conversion against I'm assuming both AD and AP. For range it stays the same. So yeah, that's gonna be pretty much it for the ENF patch. So thank you so much for watching the video, guys. See you guys in the next one, and goodbye.